Greetings, fans of hard, heavy, progressive, and classic rock. This is Peter Scove of Music is a Journey. It's been a couple of weeks. No, it's been about 3 or 4 weeks now since I threw up my last video. Threw up. Anyway, it's time for another one. Had a different bunch of topics to choose from. I decided that tonight is night for me. I decided that I am going to talk finally about my collection of Deep Purple family albums. What am I talking about? Okay, well, first of all, over the years, Deep Purple has had a total of 14 members in the band. However, Joe Satriani was only a touring member, so he actually didn't contribute anything to the recordings of Deep Purple. So I'm going to talk about the 13 members who have participated in the band as recording artists. Now, I should give you some background information on my interest in Deep Purple just because I feel like it. It was probably around late 1983, early 1984. I was really into heavy metal, as I have stated many times, and I was getting interested in the roots of metal going back to the 70s, and of course I soon heard about Deep Purple. At that time, Deep Purple albums available on cassette were few. There was Deep Purple in Rock, Deep Purple Machine Head, the Philharmonic Orchestra one that they did, made in Japan, and after that there was just a bunch of compilation albums like 24 Karat Purple or Deepest Purple, the very best of Deep Purple, and I think there was one other one as well. Anyway, you could not get the rest of the band's catalog. However, just around that time, the Tetragrammaton label albums, the first 3, were released on cassette. Now, my interest in Deep Purple coincided with me reading an article in Circus Magazine, a letter from a reader in Circus Magazine who was describing heavy metal from its birth throughout its struggles against punk and disco, and finally its triumphant dominance in the music scene in the early to mid 80s there. Probably talking about 83 or 83 around this time, 84. Anyway, that letter to the magazine said that heavy metal was born in 1964, and I thought that's very interesting. I wonder what heavy metal sounded like in 1964. And somehow probably this got conflated with the idea that Deep Purple were one of the earliest metal bands. Yeah, it's disputable, but anyway, or one of the earliest contributors to the, fledgling heavy metal scene. And I just somehow got the idea that the Deep Purple self-titled album, the third album of 1969, must somehow have been released in 1964, and I was really thrilled when I found I could actually get it on cassette. Well, of course, that's totally mixed up. But anyway, that was one of the earliest memories I had of being interested in Deep Purple. I was still in grade 7 at the time, so yeah, I know it must have been around late 83, early 84. So anyway, I became really interested in the band. At that time, I got this book, Deep Purple, the illustrated biography by Chris Charlesworth. Lots of photos telling the history of the band up until the breakup. Even covers a little bit of some failed attempts to get the band back together again after they broke up. And then shortly after that, the band did get back together. The Mark II lineup with Ian Gillan and Roger Glover got back together, and they recorded the Perfect Strangers album, and Deep Purple were once again on the go. Now at that time, when Perfect Strangers came out, I was in 8th grade, which in British Columbia, Canada, that would be the first year of junior high school. And in my art class, I designed a folder which combined the concept of the Deep Purple Perfect Strangers logo, the big kind of metallic DP, with the original concept of the first album, Shades of Deep Purple, where there was a version with shades of Deep Purple written in different shades of purple. And I put those two ideas together, and I was actually cleaning up in here several months ago and I found I still had that folder, and I thought I should put it aside for when I do this video. And today I've been looking all over for it, and it's not where I thought I would have thought to put it. So I can't find it. But if I find it before this video is ready to go up on YouTube, I might just stick it in here somewhere as a picture. So if you see it, that means I found it. If not, it's still missing in action. Anyway, I was really into Deep Purple through to In Through the Outdoors, Led Zeppelin, House of Blue Light, and sometime after that I kind of fell out. My interests went elsewhere, and even though I checked out albums as they came out in the stores, I never really felt like picking them up. You know, Ian Gillan left, and then later on Richie Blackmore left, and then John Lord left, and wow, okay, it just wasn't Deep Purple for me anymore. But sometime around 2006, I was in Japan. I'm still in Japan now. I was looking in a CD shop, and I found Rapture of the Deep, and I thought, so what are Deep Purple doing these days anyway? What do they sound like? And I bought the album, and I was surprised to see, you know, Don Airey and Steve Morse, who were they, right, in the band. But Ian Gillan was back, Roger Glover was back, Ian Pace was there, so okay. And actually I quite liked the album. I thought it was pretty cool. And from then on I started checking out everything I had missed, plus all the previous albums from the 70s, which were not available on cassette during the 80s. Yeah, actually when Perfect Strangers came out, Burn and Fireball were reissued on cassette, so I was able to get them. But you know, Come Taste the Band was not available. And then, of course, there were all the ones after House of Blue Light that came out that I never picked up. I got and was really into Deep Purple again. And then I thought, you know, what have these guys been doing? There's 13 members in total who have contributed to the recordings of Deep Purple. What were they all doing? I mean, I knew Richie Blackmore had went on to form Rainbow. I knew David Coverdale went on to form Whitesnake. I knew Ian Gillan had his band Gillan. I actually had a cassette of Future Shock, which I found at a used cassette store. But basically, aside from Rainbow and Whitesnake, everything else was a mystery. There were bands mentioned in this book. I didn't know anything about them really. But of course, by 2007, 2008, you could pretty much get anything on CD. And so I got a lot of stuff just tracking out where different members of Deep Purple, past and present, had been in their careers and what contributions they had made to albums and so on. And so that's what I want to talk about in today's video. So this is my collection from 2006, 2007, 2008. And after that, I don't think I bought anything except for newer Deep Purple albums. So we're about like a 12, 13 years behind in making this video. But I think at that time, 2008, I'm not even sure if I knew about YouTube, and I certainly was not making videos. So now, after that blah 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 long preamble part, let's get into it. So I did want to try to break it up so that I could cover each member individually. However, I found, you know, there's some overlap and just some things with chronology, so it's roughly organized but still very loose. Okay, so one of the interesting finds at the time, back in 2006, 2007, this is The Maze in Special Dance Discotheque, Harlem Shuffle, I'm So Glad, What Now, and The Trap. The Maze featured, where is he? Rod Evans, original Deep Purple vocalist here, and Ian Pace, young Ian Pace on drums here. 3 other members. Yeah, I can't see well enough anymore. Too much age on my eyes. But anyway, yeah, this was a reissue at the time. This was their EP. One of their last recordings, I think, before, obviously, these two fellas went off to join Deep Purple. And the thing was that I read, Deep Purple already had chosen a drummer for the band. John Lord and Richie Blackmore had already chosen a drummer. They were looking for a vocalist, and Ian Pace came along with Rod Evans for Rod Evans's audition. And then they said, well, why don't you play the drums for us? And they were so impressed with him, so the original selected drummer was out. Ian Pace was in, Rod Evans was in, and of course with Nicky Simper on bass, the Mark I lineup was born. So anyway, this is pretty cool. I have not listened to it for a very long time, but yeah, it's pretty cool. And more about The Maze to come along. So here is another band I checked out, the Art Woods. This is a band featuring Art Wood. I think it's the older brother of Ronnie Wood. And this was a band with John Lord on keyboards. In fact, John Lord before his long hair and mustache. So there are a couple of albums available by the Art Woods. And basically we're looking at a kind of jazzy, bluesy rock band with lots of Hammond organ solos and guitar solos and pretty cool stuff. There are some funny tracks on here, like Molly Anderson's Cookery Book, which is a kind of humorous thing about cooking with some, well, basically somebody is describing cooking something to music, and it gets a little bit silly at times, like the asparagus, the onions are done, like this kind of thing. And then there was another one here. I'm looking for a saxophonist doubling French horn wearing size 37 boots. This is again an instrumental where somebody is coming into the studio and trying to ask the band if they know of this saxophonist and interrupting the band, and at the end they throw him through the window or something, it sounds like. Anyway, the Artwoods. And one thing that's interesting that's on another Artwoods album is they did a cover of the song Hoochie Coochie Man. And we're going to hear about that one a little bit later on here when we talk about John Lord later on in his career. But anyway, that's the Artwoods. Now, this was an album called PrePurple People, which I also picked up at the time, including The Government, which features some really early recordings of David Coverdale. Maze, we already saw them. There's, I think it's a couple of different tracks that are not on that one there. Santa Barbara Machine Head, which is actually, I think it's Ron Wood and John Lord. Pretty groovy, heavy stuff, actually. Boz, Blackmore's Orchestra, Sun Dragon, which also features Richie Blackmore, Anan, Episode 6. There are some pretty cool Episode 6 songs, but the recording quality is really crappy, unfortunately. I think it's like, you know, recorded live bootleg type thing or whatever. But yeah, let's see, 2 songs by The Maze, 4 songs by Government with The Government with David Coverdale for Episode 6. Episode 6 was actually getting pretty heavy, especially one called I Am a Cloud. It is a pretty heavy, aggressive song, one of their final recordings, I think. Okay, so that's PrePurple People. Super fuzz, it says. And then we go back to the 1963, 1964 period. This is The Outlaws. The Outlaws Ride Again, featuring Richie Blackmore, Chas Hodges, and Mick Underwood on drums. You're going to hear about Mick Underwood at least, I think, 3 more times in this video. But yeah, this is early, kind of like country western, electric country western instrumental stuff with Richie Blackmore on guitar. Then at the very end, when they were basically done with their career, they were allowed to record one more single on their own. So they did the A-side and the B-side. And this is Keep a Knockin' and Shake With Me. And especially Shake With Me, Richie Blackmore is showing some incredible guitar technique in 1964. I can see that. Haha. Yeah, it is so cool. And the notes inside say that the band actually wanted to get into this more kind of hard rock sound that was coming out around 1964. So they were really into recording these 2 songs. Apparently, Richie Blackmore's reputation for his guitar playing skills kind of spread through the underground, and people would come to see him. And he does some really cool, impressive stuff on that song, Shake With Me. You can find Shake With Me on YouTube. Just the sound with some video put in. But it's worth listening to for sure. The Outlaws with Richie Blackmore. And then Richie Blackmore Getaway Groups and Sessions. Double disc with, holy crap, it's like 28 tracks on each disc. Most of them are short 1960s tracks of like 2 minutes long or whatever. But we've got, of course, we've got the Outlaws on here. Who else? We have Screaming Lord Sutch on here. Train Kept a Rollin'. We have, oh man, Green Bullfrog, Sun Dragon, Anan, Boz, which you heard about, Neil Christian and the Crusaders. So much stuff. I mean, Richie Blackmore says that he probably did about some like 400 session recordings prior to joining Deep Purple. And yeah, he was in Screaming Lord Sutch. He was in the Outlaws. He was with, what's his name now? Gene Vincent. That's right. He was also playing with Gene Vincent. So he was in some bands as well as doing all these session recordings. But apparently he learned a lot during these session recording years. And it's kind of interesting. And at the very end, I think somewhere, that's right, at the end of disc 1, there is a BBC radio interview where he talks about his experience playing as a session player and in early bands before joining Deep Purple. Okay, here we have Deep Purple, not Deep Purple, The Roots of Deep Purple, the complete episode 6. This is all of the band's singles, recorded with Ian Gillan, Mick Underwood on drums, Roger Glover on bass, Episode 6, 6 members. It's really different. Like, if you listen to this, except for maybe the last 1 or 2 tracks, it's really different from what was going to come along with Deep Purple. I mean, Ian Gillan is basically a normal singer on this album, except on, what is it called here? Mr. Universe. I think there's a song, Mr. Universe, where I think his voice starts getting a little bit rough in there. Mozart's versus the rest is an excellent guitar instrumental. Jack Dore is really different, but the rest of it is quite British psychedelic poppy type stuff. Pretty cool though. However, for a much more interesting view, you might want to find episode 6, Cornflakes and Crazy Foam, a double disc of rarities, of outtakes, of demos, of bootleg, whatever, all sorts of stuff. A lot of the songs on here are not particularly clear, like they were not meant to be released as a single, but there are some interesting peeks into episode 6 evolving into a kind of more heavier band. And what is the track on here now? Steal Your Heart Away, no. Stay With Me Baby, no. Morning Dew, no. Damn it. Something's Gotten Hold of My Heart. I believe that's it. This is sung by, what's her name? Sheila Carter, was it? The female member of the band. Oh, no photo here. She's down here somewhere. However, Ian Gillan is singing backing vocals, and he is hitting those high notes. I mean, if you thought Child in Time just came out of nowhere, this is where it was coming from. He was already doing those really high notes as kind of background vocals here for that song. So really lots of cool stuff, just most of it not really clear and sharp, except for the stuff that actually was released as singles or B-sides. Episode 6, okay. You know, I actually have somewhere around here Johnny Kidd and the Pirates, and the reason why I got it was because the very last 2 recordings, the last single and B-side ever recorded by Johnny Kidd and the Pirates with the original Johnny Kidd, featured apparently Nicky Simper on bass. He had just joined the band. Now, I have read somewhere that he did not play on any recordings, but I also read that he played on those last 2. I don't know where I put the damn thing. I know I have it around here somewhere. But anyway, Johnny Kidd and the Pirates, Nicky Simper on bass on the very last song there. And then, of course, Nicky and Johnny Kidd were in a car crash. Johnny Kidd died. Nicky was severely injured, but anyway managed to recover and was well enough to later on join Deep Purple about 2 years after that. However, sticking with the idea of Nicky Simper, after Deep Purple, he went on to some other band. I've forgotten the name now, something with Martha. They did not record anything, but then he started up Warhorse, which features Ashley Holt on vocals. Ashley would later on work with Rick Wakeman on his English rock orchestra, something like that. Anyway, this is the debut album of Warhorse. It sounds to me very much modeled after Deep Purple. In fact, one of the tracks on here, Ritual, I believe it's Ritual is an instrumental, sounds an awful lot like Ring That Neck, Hard Road, Ring That Neck from Deep Purple. But anyway, some pretty cool stuff on here. 7 tracks. Woman of the Devil is my favorite. If you're looking for kind of early, heavy music with lots of organ and powerful vocals, if you have never checked out Warhorse, this one is worth checking out. The second album I never got. I'm not sure how it sounds. Nicky Simper was actually, he had a lot of bad luck with bands. I mean, Johnny Kidd and the Pirates, there was the car accident, the band was over. Then he was with another band, but got co-opted into Deep Purple, basically, where he was really happy, and then suddenly he and Rod Evans were just, like, replaced without even being told, until they were told, don't bother showing up for the next recording session, and John Lord had to tell them, you're out of the band. Then, yeah, he went on with Warhorse. They recorded a couple of albums, and then that didn't really work out. And then later on, he started a couple of other bands around the same time. I think one of them was Fox something. I forget the name now. But another one was called Nick Simper's Fandango. And this was the one album I was able to get here. This is Slipstreaming and Future Times. They're 2 albums they released, put together on one disc. And it is pretty much a rock, hard rock band. typical electric guitars, keyboards, and so on. But pretty good. There's Nick down there anyway. I don't think there was ever anything big to come out of this, but anyway, Nick Simper's Fandango. Then the only other thing I ever heard of Nick Simper actually appearing on a recording, he's still, as far as I know, he's still active in music unless he retired, but at least 12 years ago he was still active. He was a part of Quatermass 2. Now Quatermass is one of those classic prog bands from the early 70s that had a strong, I think, jazz influence as I understand it. I've never heard it. But here's Quatermass 2, Long Road. This album here is more of a, this was during the 1990s at some point. So it's more of a rock album. Again, rock, a little bit hard rock at times. And the interesting thing is, drummer is Mick Underwood. Again, from episode 6 and The Outlaws. And guesting on keyboards is Don Airey. Yeah, so when I got this, I thought that was pretty cool because I got Nicky Simper and I got Don Airey and Mick Underwood, who is not a Deep Purple member, never was, but worked together with Deep Purple members. All right, Quatermass 2. And then, of course, we're talking about Rod Evans, The Maze before Deep Purple, after Deep Purple, went on to do Captain Beyond. He stayed behind in California, married a woman there, as I understand it, formed Captain Beyond with Lee Dorman of Iron Butterfly, wasn't it? And as well, Bobby Caldwell, who would later on go to play with Keith Relf in Armageddon, which will be a topic in another episode. Already prepared the notes years ago. Okay, and this album is one of those really hard, aggressive, great albums, almost a little bit progressive as well, that shows up on these kind of proto-metal lists out there on the internet. That's how I found out about it. The second album, Sufficiently Breathless, really is different. There were some member changes in the lineup still. Rod Evans on vocals. Bobby Caldwell is not playing drums, I think. It is a much more relaxed, laid-back album, not as heavy, hard-hitting, and aggressive as this one. The third album that they released a few years later, I'm not sure about. And of course, after that, Rod Evans made the poor decision to join a kind of new Deep Purple, where Rod was the only member who had ever played in the band, and they were told to cease and desist, and they did not. And then, of course, that version of Deep Purple was attacked by the Deep Purple management, and Rod Evans ran away from the music scene, tail between his legs, and last I think I heard he was breeding Alsatians in Arizona, somebody said. Maybe Richie said. Not sure. Anyway, let's see here. There's another stack here behind me. So this is Ian Gillan. Okay, so we talked about him in episode 6. He had actually been in a few other bands before it, joining episode 6, including Wainwright's Gentleman, where I believe for a short time he played together with Mick Tucker, who later on was the drummer for Sweet. But anyway, after he left Deep Purple, he quit the business. He opened a motorcycle repair garage and a hotel, lost a ton of money, and then, oh, I should have talked about Roger Glover before this, but he was asked to come in and perform on Roger Glover's Butterfly Ball album, because one of the very important singers, who I'll mention when we get to that album, was not allowed to sing by another member of Deep Purple that he was working with. So Roger called Ian, hey, how'd you like to come on stage? Ian went on stage, people cheered, and he got back into the music scene, and he recorded this album, Ian Gillan, Cher Kazoo, and Other Stories, which I think, I don't know if it was ever officially released or not, but these are all the songs that were recorded. It's a kind of, you know, British children's type story thing that has, you know, obviously some kind of more, I guess, adult type message to it. And then there were a bunch of other songs that were recorded. One of them here, You Make Me Feel So Good. Ian hits one of his powerful screams and just holds it with vibrato for I don't know how many measures it is, but it is pretty darn impressive and shows that he still has what he always had. So an interesting album anyway, certainly, and it's Ian Gillan getting back on his feet. After this, he would go on and start up the Ian Gillan Band. Apparently, though, he had a lot of trouble trying to get record companies interested in him at the time. He'd call them up and say, hey, this is Ian Gillan. You know, Ian Gillan, formerly of Deep Purple. And they'd be like, you know, F off and hang up the phone. But anyway, later on, when he left Deep Purple in the late 1980s or around 1990 or so, basically he was having troubles. Richie Blackmore didn't want him in the band. And Roger Glover said, I'll get him to write 2 songs, and if he can do that in the next 3 days, he stays in the band. Richie agreed. Ian didn't write those 2 songs. He was out of the band, and he went off and did his Ian Gillan Naked Thunder album. This is a little bit more of a laid-back album. It's not as aggressive, but still has some, some good rocking tunes anyway. It's not really heavy, but good rocking tunes. And I think there was one here, Loving on Borrowed Time, which is a really beautiful ballad, which I really liked, which he later on did on another album of his we'll talk about in a moment. Then he went on, and basically it looks like he started up Gillan again, but with a whole new lineup, including Leonard Hayes, former drummer of Y&T. I should say the late Leonard Hayes. He passed away some years back. But this is one of the album's Toolbox, and man, it's back to the hard-rocking, powerful vocal Ian Gillan that we know. And they basically just wanted to have fun rocking out and just getting out there and having a great time. And then they found that a lot of their tours were getting canceled, or shows were getting canceled, shows were getting pulled. Somebody was messing up with the band, and it turned out it was Deep Purple's management, because the rest of the members of the band wanted him back in again. Richie said no, everybody else said yes. So that was basically the end of the second run of Gillan there. Okay, a little bit later on, Ian Gillan also did this one. I think it was 2008 or so. I can't see. Gillan's In, and this was where he did some new songs as well, covered some of his old songs from his time with Gillan. Lots of guests on here, including Joe Satriani. I think Tony Iommi is on here, John Lord, Ian Pace, Roger Glover, Joe Satriani, Ronnie James Dio, Michael Lee, drummer, and Jeff Healey. Oh, wow, okay. Yeah, this is actually a really impressive album, and some of the old Gillan songs get a total retreatment on here, and they really kick ass. Way much more than they did back in the early 80s when they were originally recorded. So that was Gillan's In. This, like I said, probably around 2008 or 2007 this came out. So already it's pretty old. It's pretty heavy too. Pretty heavy disc. Okay, now we know about Gillan, but one of the things that was kind of interesting, the last Ian Gillan band album, Scarabus, the title track, Scarabus, sounds, in parts, very similar to Disturbing the Priest from Black Sabbath's Born Again album. Yeah, if you listen to Scarabus and hear just that, the verse part, I can't think of what he's singing now, but anyway, that verse part is very similar to the verse part of Disturbing the Priest by Black Sabbath from the Born Again album. So I think Ian took that along with him, and well, anyway, kind of interesting to note. Rest of it is basically a good rock album. A little bit hard at times, similar to what we would hear from Gillan. Ian Gillan was taking this band as a kind of jazz fusion rock type band, and he wanted to turn it into something a little bit more rocking. Then Colin Towns, keyboard player, came up with a beautiful song, and the rest of the band said, no, we're not doing that. And Ian said, fine, I quit my band. And he went off and formed Gillan, and they reissued back around this time too. I have most of the albums. I don't have the Live at the Budokan album, but all the other albums. Also, I don't have Clear Air Turbulence, Ian Gillan Band. I just have Child in Time, and then the actual Gillan albums. Mick Underwood playing drums on here. Also, what's his name now? Bernie Tomei on guitars. Yeah, he went and made a name for himself. And later on, near the end, also Janik Gears, who is in he's in Iron Maiden since the late 1980s, I think, or early 1990s. Also playing with Ian Gillan. And Yannick guests on the Gillan's In album, playing his guitar solo on one of the songs from the original Gillan album. I think it's Bluesy. Also, one interesting note about this album, there's one song in here, I forget which one it was now, but it has a kind of a pretty good resemblance to Van Halen's Jump. It has this opening cheerful keyboard thing, and it's kind of a fun, upbeat rock song. And there are notes inside here that say that while they were working on this in the studio, a young man by the name of Eddie Van Halen popped his head in to see how they were doing and what they were doing. And a little bit a year later, so later on. Okay, wow, apparently the camera stopped recording for some reason. So yeah, anyway, a little bit, a year or so after that, after Gillan broke up, Jump came out, and Ian Gillan, of course, noticed these similarities. Now, I wouldn't say the songs are exactly the same, but I can see how there could have been inspiration. There are similarities. Okay then, yeah, I wanted to shuffle the discs around here, so just give me a second. Alright, I'm back. I moved the CDs around, and in fact, I changed my clothes. And in fact, this is actually 2 days later. I should have put in one of those little notes like 2 days later, this kind of thing. But anyway, yeah, I suddenly I moved the CDs. I started talking. Kat wanted in, and next thing you know, duty called, and I had to stop recording. So I also noticed this video starting to get a little bit on the long side, at least for this channel anyway. I know usually I don't do short videos. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk about another 10 albums or so, and then I think we're going to call this part 1, and then in a few days I'll get around to doing part 2. So anyway, I was going to talk about Roger Glover next, and I'm bringing up this one here, Roger Glover and Guests, The Butterfly Ball. This was his first kind of solo project thing he did after getting ousted from Deep Purple. As the story goes, Ian Gillan was not very happy about the way things were going in the band. He was especially having trouble with Ritchie Blackmore. I think that was the main thing. And he wrote a letter to the management and said, basically saying, I'm thinking of quitting the band, hoping that the management would say, oh, we can't have that happen, we better do something. And instead they said, Ian's quitting. And then Ritchie said, oh well, get rid of Roger too. So poor Roger. But anyway, he went off and did this butterfly ball thing. This is similar to the Ian Gillan Cher Kazoo Stories one. It is like a kid's story. We have like Harlequin hair, old blind mole, magician moth. It sounds like a kid's story. On the back there's a picture with some mole character with worms coming out of his pocket. But anyway, a lot of interesting guests on here. Most notably, there are people like Glenn Hughes and David Coverdale, who of course replaced Gillan and Glover in the band, or took over for them. And also Ronnie James Dio sings on here on I think 3 or 4 of the tracks, and great voice. Now the story that's very interesting here, and I kind of mentioned this earlier with Ian Gillan's stories of Cher Kazoo and other stories, was that when this was going to be performed live, at that point Ronnie James Dio and Elf had basically come to an end. Ronnie was off with Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow, and Ritchie said, you are in Rainbow now. You are not participating in anything else, especially something that Roger Glover did, which I don't think he actually said, but that was kind of implied maybe. So Ronnie couldn't do the performance, and that's when Roger called up Ian, who hadn't sung for a year or 2 on stage, and said, would you like to take over, because, you know, we need someone to stand in. And that's where Ian Gillan got back into show business. Alright, so anyway, Butterfly Ball, Roger Glover. And Roger, of course, during the 70s, he was producing a lot of albums, including some by Nazareth and Judas Priest's Sin After Sin, one of my favorites. However, Roger said, I've been playing in kind of heavy guitar rock bands. I've been producing heavy guitar rock bands. I want to do something without guitar. And so he did this one here, Elements. This is no guitars, all other sorts of instruments and vocals and so on, but no guitars. I haven't listened to this for a long time, but I think it is quite enjoyable. And basically we have 5 tracks, each based on a ring. The first ring made of clay, the next ring of fire, the third ring's watery flow, the fourth rings with the wind, and then finale. I remember I really liked one of these tracks in here, and another one was also really good too. But yeah, very different. Has that kind of latter half of the 70s feel to it, minus the electric guitars. If you can get a hold of Roger Glover's Elements or find it on YouTube or something, give it a listen if you don't know about it. Okay, Roger went on again in, I think it was 83, 84. He came out with this one here, Mask. This is more of an 80s, early 80s pop rock album. It's not exactly to my taste, but there are a couple of tracks that I rather like. And I think one of them features a bass solo. Maybe it's the last one, Don't Look Down. But yeah, it's like what you would expect from a 70s rock musician in the 80s, keeping up with the times. Paul McCartney, whatever, that kind of thing. But it's all right. It's all right. But anyway, I've got it. I had it on cassette before. I have it on CD. Of course, I bought this, like I said, like 2006, 2007, 2008. And many years later, Roger Glover did Snapshot. Roger Glover and the Guilty Party. I think his daughter is featured on one or two tracks here as a lead vocal. But it is a rock album, but it is not a hard rock album. It might be a little bit of a rock album at times, but it also gets pretty light. I mean, there he is with an acoustic guitar, right? And I don't remember if there are any bass solos on here. But it still is a pretty good album. There are a number of tracks on here that I like. And if he has done anything since then, like I said, after about 2008, I didn't explore the Deep Purple family any further. I just kept up with the Deep Purple releases. Okay, I want to talk about one more musician for this video, and then we'll leave the rest of them for the second half. I want to talk about Jon Lord. We already mentioned that he was in the Artwoods and Santa Barbara Machine Head, and wasn't it the Flower Pot Men? He was in that with Nicky Simper before they moved on to Deep Purple. So anyway, his first, I think this was his first solo album, 1976, later than I thought. Sarabande, of course, Jon Lord being responsible for writing the classical side of with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra album, as well as some of the stuff that appeared on their third self-titled album. So here he is doing his thing. It is, though, an interesting mix of kind of classical and rock. And I think the guitarist on here is Andy Summers. It is, it's Andy Summers. Also Pete York on drums, whose name sounds familiar to me. But yeah, that was his first of a few solo albums, more classically oriented. Another one here was Pictured Within, Jon Lord. This is again non-rock album. Piano and I guess some organ, I think, if I remember correctly. Some strings, other more laid back, easygoing, pretty beautiful, nice, relaxing type music. I think he had another one called Elephants or something too, which I don't have. And then I believe that one of the last ones he did was Beyond the Notes. I'm not sure if he did one more after that, but anyway, Beyond the Notes. And he had one of the vocalists from ABBA on here. Drat, I don't remember which one. But anyway, I actually quite liked this one here. This a number of the tracks. This was the first of Jon Lord's solo albums I got. And there were a number of tracks I really liked. Again, like, it's not one I listen to often, but certainly it's worth keeping, I think. All right, one other thing, Jon Lord, when I was tracking down what he was doing, he appeared here, the Hoochie Coochie Men featuring Jon Lord, Danger, White Men Dancing, guest appearances by Ian Gillan, Jimmy Barnes, and Jeff Duff. All right, so this was actually a band called the Hoochie Coochie Men. Jon Lord, I think this was out of Australia. Actually, is it Bob Daisley? Oh, it might have been Bob Daisley. It is Bob Daisley, Tim Gaze, Rob Grosser, and Jon Lord as a special guest or featuring whatever on this album. This is a really good blues rock album. Nicely done, well produced, great songs, and 2 songs by Ian Gillan. Great stuff. Love his performance on there. And Jimmy Barnes doing Hoochie Coochie Man. Is so good. It's such a great track. And as I mentioned, Hoochie Coochie Man was actually done by the Artwoods as well. I mean, like, they recorded a version of it, and here's Jon Lord appearing on it again with Jon Lord and the Hoochie Coochie Men. Yeah, this is a great album. I have to listen to this one again. Lots of cool tracks on there. Okay, of course, when Deep Purple folded in 1976, Jon Lord and Ian Pace, who had been the sole consistent members throughout all the band's career up until that point, went off and formed not Malice in Wonderland, formed Pace Ashton Lord with Tony Ashton, late Tony Ashton. And they did this album here, Malice in Wonderland. And this is a pretty cool album too. The first one, Ghost Story, is brilliant. Silas and Jerome, that actually is got a bit of humor to it. Number of other songs on here. This is a pretty cool, groovy rock album of the latter half of the 70s. Yeah, worth keeping, I thought. Definitely. And I guess we're going to bring up Bernie Marsden, because, of course, Bernie Marsden became one of the original, I think the original guitarist in Whitesnake. Bernie Marsden and Mickey Moody, right? Before John Sykes came along. But Bernie Marsden did this solo album, and of course John Lord and Ian Pace were also in Whitesnake after an album or two. So they appear on here as guests. It says somewhere, and again, I can't read as clearly as I used to. Oh, featuring John Lord, Ian Pace, Jack Bruce, Don Airey. All right, we have 3 Deep Purple members, past and present, on this album here. Simon Phillips, Cozy Powell, and Neil Murray. What a lineup. Yeah, and this is not my usual pick. It's a rock album, you know, blues-influenced rock album, but it's got some pretty groovy tunes on there, and I do rather like it. And hey, it's got 3 Deep Purple members in here. So, yeah, I think I'm going to leave it at that for now. Of course, we could talk about, excuse me, Whitesnake, John Lord and Ian Pace in there, David Coverdale, of course, Glenn Hughes coming in to guest on a couple of albums as backing vocals, Don Airey coming in doing keyboards on some vocals, but Whitesnake is such a big name band, as I think I said earlier in the video, so Whitesnake and Rainbow, we don't need to talk about them too much. Although the interesting thing about Rainbow is, I'll save that for when I get to Joe Lynn Turner. Anyway, so there's part 1. All right, that's almost a box. It's almost a box for part 1, and I will get back with part 2 in a few days. Thanks for watching so far. I hope you learned something, maybe, or just maybe you refreshed your memory, or maybe I goofed up in a couple of places. But yeah, we'll see you again in part 2 then, as we talk about other members, past and present, of Deep Purple. Okay, catch you then. Take care. Good night. Goodbye. Have a nice day, week, and wherever. Ciao.